Hey everyone, let's talk about this little document that the White House released, National Security Presidential Memorandum, or SPM-7. This is going to be a wild ride. This is a directive to investigate terrorism and terrorist activities and put an end to it, essentially. So I'm going to read this section. Investigating domestic terrorist organizations, the National Joint Terrorism Task Force and its local offices shall coordinate and supervise a comprehensive national strategy to investigate, prosecute, and disrupt entities and individuals engaged in acts of political violence and intimidation designed to suppress lawful political activity or obstruct the rule of law. This strategy shall include the investigatory and prosecutorial measures set forth in this section. Here's what we're really here to talk about today. Common threads animating this violent conduct include anti-Americanism, anti-capitalism, and anti-Christianity, support for the overthrow of the United States government, extremism on migration, race, and gender, and hostility toward those who hold traditional American views on family, religion, and morality. Now, just for being an atheist in the United States, I get called a lot of these things all the time, particularly anti-American and anti-Christian. Nick Fish, you are the president of American Atheists. Certainly, you're called these things regularly, regardless of how peaceful and good for society your organization is. Do you see your organization potentially being targeted by language like this?
Yeah, and I mean, I think this is the intention of this order, or this memo, is to actually stifle and silence lawful political speech. There are those of us out there who care very deeply about the way that America is set up, the way that our government is descending into outright authoritarianism. This is targeting us. This is taking lawful speech, lawful political activity, lawful engagement, and dressing it up and pretending that it's terrorism. And it's nothing of the sort. What we're doing right now is entirely American. There's nothing more American than protesting your government. It's what our entire country is founded upon. And so the fact that this administration is trying to do a sort of jujitsu move and flip it around and pretend that they're the ones under attack, I think we need to call it out for what it is. It's an attempt to seize power by this administration, by this president, by this regime, to take away and threaten our rights. And we have to be really upfront about pushing back on this as strongly as possible right from the get-go.
We've got to ask, I think, what counts as extremism here, especially on things like migration, race, and gender, or hostility toward those with traditional views. Now, I want to throw it over to Fish Stark, the executive director of the American Humanist Association. Humanists have very long been called radical for demanding civil rights and dignity for everyone, regardless of race, gender, religion, or family structure. Does this new directive concern you?
So let's be clear about what this directive does and doesn't do, right? This doesn't create any kind of new authority. It doesn't increase funding to anything. It doesn't give the government power to do anything it doesn't already have power to do. The directive is designed to do one thing, and that's intimidate people while actually doing nothing, which is the Donald Trump hallmark, right? He's going to come in and he's going to throw around a lot of words and he's going to try to make people obey him in advance. The goal here, very specifically, is to try and intimidate the people who are in our organizations, the people who run our organizations, and the people who fund our organizations into shutting up. And so what I'm worried about is that people might misread this and take the bait, because the truth is, this order doesn't, and Donald Trump can't rewrite the Constitution or our fundamental First Amendment right to express displeasure with our government, criticize any institution we want in America, including religious institutions. So yeah, humanists have absolutely always dealt with the idea that we are less than true Americans, right? One of our former board members, Corliss Lamont, famously got hauled before the House Un-American Activities Committee in the 50s and had to prove that he was a true patriot. But ultimately, this is just them going back to their same old bag of tactics, trying to intimidate us into shutting up because they know they don't actually have the legal standing to shut us down.
All right. These directives, I think, can be interpreted to include actually very common views among Americans. And to throw it back over to Nick Fish, you guys work in coalition with interfaith organizations all the time. So it's not just atheists that you're regularly working with, even if you are often representing the atheist community. Could you see this directive trying to intimidate and target your coalition allies as well?
Absolutely. And I have to echo almost completely what Fish just said. This directive is aimed at those people, the people that work with us, that are willing to stand shoulder to shoulder with atheists, with people who care about our trans family and loved ones, with people who care about Palestinians, with people who care about criminal justice reform. That's who this is aimed at targeting, and what they're hoping for is that we're just going to let it happen. What we've seen from the private sector, what we've seen, unfortunately, from too many in higher ed, is a willingness to comply, a willingness to just settle these lawsuits. We just saw YouTube settle with with Donald Trump, not the Trump administration, with Donald Trump to the tune of more than $25 million because they're afraid. What we as leaders in the nonprofit world, leaders as advocates, leaders in community spaces have to do is absolutely refuse to allow ourselves to be silenced. Don't allow ourselves to be silenced, and make sure we're standing in solidarity with a whole range of groups, whether it's churches, progressive churches, whether it's mosques, whether it's other religious minority groups, whether it's racial or gender or sexual minorities and so on. We have to be willing to stand in solidarity with those folks and stand in front of this administration as they bumble and fumble around flailing. And the unfortunate reality is that flailing, people get hit. People get hurt by that. Just because they're grabbing for whatever power they can doesn't mean that they're not going to get people caught up in the immense power of the federal government. And I think we have to be honest with people about that. That even though, as Fish said, this order doesn't create any new authority, doesn't cite any new authority, it doesn't, you can't just create that stuff from whole cloth. They still are going to make the process hell. And they're going to do that in a way that is intended to harass and intimidate people, and we can't allow them to do that.
I think it's really important that we don't let this gaslight us either. They're portraying all of these things, these progressive and humanist values, as being inherently violent, when we know full well that all of these ideas are informed by an opposition of violence, particularly state violence in these cases, or the persecution of minorities in any context. I think that what we're seeing is a kind of gaslighting where they're attempting to define resistance of fascism as a type of fascism itself.
I mean, what is it they say? A hit dog hollers, right? Like, I'm not going to be lectured about traditional American views on family by someone who's on his third wife. And I'm not going to have it implied to me that I support acts of violent revolution by someone who encouraged his supporters to storm the Capitol on January 6, 2021, and is spending more of his time fighting to get pardons for people who tried to undermine our democracy than fighting to get grocery prices down or gas prices down. Ultimately, there is this wild assertion by the Trump administration that somehow humanist organizations or leftist organizations promote violence. The truth is, we as humanists have always consistently said all human life is equally valuable and we're on the side of peace. Meanwhile, President Trump is promoting the U.S. military's extrajudicial actions against non-combatants in places like the Caribbean, right? They are signing off on Benjamin Netanyahu's genocide in Gaza. They are promoting and propagating political violence when it suits their purposes, and they're turning around and pointing the finger at and trying to silence organizations who are saying, no, you can't devalue human life like this.
I think this is a good opportunity to turn it over to you, Fish, for a second, to just tell me what the American Humanist Association actually does. You're obviously not promoting these kind of extremist behaviors, so what do you guys actually do? What are they coming after you for doing?
Look, humanism is a belief system that for 100 years in America has said, science tells us what's real, empathy tells us what's right, and our moral duty is to treat people and the planet decently. That's it. That's the whole tweet. And the AHA, for nearly 100 years, has worked to build community for humanists, places where we can belong and become better people. So what we do is we bring people together in about 250 local groups around the country to talk about what we believe, to try and learn from one another, and then to make a difference in our communities. We combine that with legal work and legislative advocacy to make sure that we protect the separation of church and state and the freedom of and from religion, not just for humanists, but for everyone with minority religious belief. And so if you want to look at that and say that's un-American, I mean, You're welcome to, because you have the right to free speech, but we see it as carrying on the legacy of humanists like Thomas Paine and Thomas Jefferson, who fought for a country where we have freedom of conscience and who wanted citizens to be doing more things like this, coming together to talk about what we believe and help each other. We're trying to replace something that the radical right has broken in this country, which is a sense of community, right? They have for years made it harder for us to live our lives by continuing to depress our wages and funnel more money towards the top 1%, made it harder for us to just be happy, much less come together with other people who believe what we believe. They're fully backed by social media billionaires who make their profits by pushing us further apart. They keep taking money away from the things like schools and community centers and the arts that bring people together. And then they call the people who are trying to fix the problem violent, and they say the only solution is prayer. I think it's a pretty clear con, but we've been calling it out for a long time. We're not going to stop.
Well, I love and support what you guys do so much. I'm proud to be a member of the AHA and to work with you guys regularly. I want to encourage everyone watching right now to go become a member of the AHA as well. The link is in the description and in the pinned comment. I'm actually going to do a Discord hangout over on the AHA Discord. That's going to be on October the 6th at 6 p.m. Just sign up for AHA membership at that link, and you'll get access to their Discord. So again, guys, click that link in the description and pinned comment and become a part of the AHA and join me on Discord. You are going to be supporting an amazing organization by doing that. They are working to change the world for the better. So thank you so much to the AHA for sponsoring this video. I love you guys.
We love you too, Drew.
You guys have hit on this a bit already, but I want to make sure that we hit this pretty hard. Documents like this are usually not published. They're usually internal documents. So what's the purpose of publishing something like this and making such a big media sensation of it? It's clearly to scare people like us, right?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And I think Fish already mentioned this as well, that this is intended to be an intimidation tool. Fundamentally, our organizations and the groups that they're purporting to target are engaged in lawful, politically patriotic, unimpeachably American actions here. And what they're trying to do is recast protesting this regime and the actions of this regime as anti-American. And there is nothing further from the truth. And so, what they're trying to do here is get us to comply in advance, and we're not going to do it. As Fish said, and as you just pointed out, Drew, this isn't anything new. Our government has tried to use the power of the federal government in the past to silence people, to silence dissent, dragging people in front of committees of Congress, having the FBI investigate them. The difference, as you say, Drew, is that this is happening out in the open. And I think it speaks to the weakness of this administration, the fact that they know that their actions are so unpopular that they feel that they need to put it out to show the illusion of doing something instead of actually doing something. Because there's nothing to do here. There's not some vast left-wing conspiracy funding political violence. It simply is not happening. But they need to show or pretend that it is so they can, check a box with the extremists who fund their side of things.
Nick, does this remind you of a video we did a little while back that was about Project 2025? And something that Project 2025 was saying is that they will seek to deport Marxists for being anti-Christian and anti-American. And we said in that video, regardless of whether you're a Marxist or not, being an atheist is something that is often associated with being a Marxist, especially in the United States. And so it's kind of pretext to deport people for being atheists, or at least not a part of the kind of religious status quo. And I'm just seeing that echoed here.
Oh, 100%. And I think, I'll mention Fish specifically and the AHA have been targets of this. When they were attacking our partners at Humanist International, they specifically said, these humanists, they're Marxists. They're secretly communists because they're humanists. And that they explicitly said that. Members of Congress said that because they're so uninformed. They're so fundamentally incurious about how other people might believe that they use these terms as just sort of exclamation marks or emoticons to say, these un-American communists who hate Christianity. And it's like, guys, you're just speaking nonsense here. And what they're trying to do, and unfortunately, we've seen so much of Project 2025 come to pass. We've seen the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, use people's political speech as a pretext to threaten them, to deport them, to take away their visas, to cancel their immigration status. And in fact, a federal court today, the day we're recording this, issued just this immense ruling saying that categorically the First Amendment protects all people, not just citizens, all people in the United States. First Amendment protects their ability to say things that might be controversial. In fact, that's what the First Amendment's intended to protect, is controversial, difficult speech. So we're seeing people pushing back. We're seeing the courts, in some cases, push back. Not the Supreme Court, but trial courts. And that's really important to remember. It's why we have to keep fighting. It's why we have to stand in solidarity with groups like immigrants, with groups like Palestinian Voices, with groups like our trans family and friends. That's who we have to be fighting for, because those are the people that are first on the list. Those are the people that are being targeted right now by this administration. Just because they're not coming after the American Humanist Association and American Atheists right this moment that we know of, doesn't mean that we're not next. But all of these groups that I'm talking about are also part of our tapestry of civil rights and advocates that care about these issues.
Now, part of this memorandum does specifically mention that the IRS will apparently come after nonprofits who are deemed problematic by the criteria that we have covered here. Fish, do you worry that the AHA could have its 501c3 status removed under these ridiculous pretenses?
Not really, and I'll tell you why. Donald Trump is a bully, and like all bullies, he picks on people he thinks are weak. Right? That's why he's chosen the groups that he's chosen to go after at the beginning. Trans kids who don't have the ability to defend themselves because they're children, right? Immigrants, non-citizens who have fewer legal rights than some of us do, although as Nick pointed out, the court is affirming that they have the right to due process, they have the right to free speech. But he's attacking non-citizens who have fewer opportunities for legal defense, attacking Palestinian rights groups, because for a long time we've had a bipartisan consensus in this country that we're not going to speak up about injustices the Palestinians are facing. He is attacking systematically the groups that he thinks can defend themselves the least to try and prove his own power. The humanist movement in America has a history of getting attacked by the government and winning. And part of the reason for that is because Americans broadly support the separation of church and state, and they understand that means that even people who have religious views they disagree with have the right to those views. So could the Trump administration come after us? Sure. Is it more likely to happen than it might under another administration? And are we taking steps to protect against that if that happens? Yes. But the truth is, I don't think they have the balls. Because, as we've seen from Trump again and again and again, he targets the people he thinks are weakest, and he picks on them. That is in part why the most important thing we can do right now, rather than holding our fire or trying to defend ourselves, is speak up for the people that he is targeting, not just because it's the humanist thing to do, to stand up for people who are being targeted. But if we stop him now, and if we erect a really, really strong wall of defense around these vulnerable communities he's attacking, people are going to get tired of this charade real fast. They already are. They're going to get tired of these constant witch hunts rather than him doing anything to attempt to make life better for working people in America or releasing the Epstein files. And he's going to lose all the political capital that he has to do even what he's doing now.
I'm glad that you guys have mentioned trans people and the just incessant attacks on their basic human rights and liberties. I want to talk about this new FBI categorization that is being applied to trans people, but I do see as something that could be applied even more widely than that. And that's this this notion of the nihilistic violent extremist. So I'll read a little bit from this. According to a September 18th report by independent journalist Ken Klippenstein, 2 anonymous national security officials said that the Bureau is discussing treating trans subjects, trans people, as a subset of its new threat category, nihilistic violent extremists, or NVEs, which was created earlier this year. They define this nihilistic violent extremism as criminal conduct in furtherance of political, social, or religious goals that derive primarily from a hatred of society at large and a desire to bring about its collapse by sowing indiscriminate chaos. Now, I don't know about you guys, but my friends, my community there's quite a large portion who are trans, and I have to say that the only place where they might be sowing indiscriminate chaos is the dance floor, where that is accepted and just a good time. But yeah, I mean, I want to run this by you and let me know what you guys think about this. Nihilistic violent extremist. Does that not feel like it comes right out of evangelical Christian apologetics? I get called a nihilistic extremist who, because I don't believe in God, am inevitably going to do all of these ridiculous nihilistic things that I guess some people would do if they didn't believe in God for some reason. Do you guys see this nihilistic violent extremism thing as kind of being a product of like evangelical think in the first place?
I don't know if it's limited to just evangelicals, but what I will say is that there's a real, Fish talks about this all the time, there's a real crisis of a sense of purpose, belonging, especially among younger, often white men who feel really disaffected with the fact that this society, they feel left behind in certain ways. They feel really alone out on an island. And, you know, what we've seen with a lot of these mass shootings is an ideology that is really incoherent, that you know, is all about sowing discord. And it has nothing to do with being trans. It has nothing to do with being a member or not a member of any particular religion. It has to do with this crisis of violence, of, you know, the 4chanification, the meme edgelord thing that we're seeing from a lot of online spaces. And I really have to, you know, commend what you and other folks are doing in building positive, affirming online communities as a bulwark against that. I think that's absolutely vital as a means of pushing back, because so many people are desperate for meaning that what they're doing is finding meaning in these, in sort of an ideological spiral. Creating a sense of belonging in being too cool to belong in something, in believing that we need to tear down the government, light it all on fire, tear down society, and burn it all down. That's what this, you know, movement, the nihilistic violent extremists, that's what they're talking about here. And what this administration is instead doing is weaponizing that and saying, you're nihilists because you don't believe in God the way that we do. You're nihilists because you don't believe in strict hierarchical gender roles or race hierarchies. And, you know, that's what we're talking about here. There's nothing violent or nihilistic about humanism. There's nothing extreme about humanism or atheism. There's nothing of the sort. In fact, we believe that this is the one life we have to live. It's anything but nihilistic. It's a view that we have to make the world a better place. That's at the core of what we believe. It has nothing to do with nihilism at all. It's just, as you said, a BS debate tactic that you often hear from apologetics. But I do want to be clear that there are real problems out there with these sort of people that are completely disaffected and disconnected and unplugged from any sort of belonging or community.
We know who the nihilistic violent extremists are because we know who the people doing the shootings are. Disproportionately, they're not trans. Disproportionately, they're not people who are on the left. Disproportionately, they're white men and they're right-wing people. Now, I don't think we should brand white men or right-wing people as nihilistic violent extremists because I don't think we should make broad category judgments about groups of people like that, right? Like, I think that we should focus on preventing, you know, threats from people who are displaying the kinds of behavior that all these mass shooters displayed leading up to their mass shootings, right? And this is, as you said, Drew, this is the part and parcel of the evangelical playbook, and it tells you how stacked this Trump administration is with complete right-wing religious wingnuts, right? It is the height of arrogance to say that anyone who has a belief system that isn't your own must automatically be a nihilist, right? Humanism is a system of positive meaning-making. It is, in fact, our attempt as folks who are atheist, agnostic, deists, who don't believe that a God guides our lives or gives us purpose to figure out, well, then what does? And our answer is and has always been other people. Our community is what gives us purpose. If we believe our purpose comes not from answering some kind of holy book or ancient edict, but taking care of the people in front of us right now, why would we try to destroy the thing that we say gives us purpose? Ultimately, I think that Nick is right? The way we actually combat nihilistic violent extremism is by giving more people a sense of purpose and giving people a sense of community. The common thread among almost all these people who commit these acts of violence is how isolated they are. And I gotta say, it's not the left in this country that has been, again, advocating to defund all the shared community spaces that we use or to make it harder for people to have leisure time because they're working 2 jobs to be able to afford their house. That's humanists who have always demanded a shared life in a shared world, who have been working to build that kind of community. Not really beating the Marxist allegations with that one, but, I digress.
Yeah, let's talk a little more about the narrative that this administration is spinning with political violence right now. They're saying explicitly it is not a series of isolated incidents and does not emerge organically. It's a culmination of sophisticated, organized campaigns of targeted intimidation, radicalization, this and this and this. Basically, that there are organizations that are training, funding political violence to happen, specifically assassinations and assassination attempts. These are not lone wolves. These are organized leftists. The problem is that there is not actually any kind of evidence for this whatsoever. And if we want to talk about organized campaigns of violence against the American people, we're talking about the people that are putting this document out in the first place, right? This is just projection, is it not?
Yeah, I mean, a couple paragraphs down, they're talking about organized doxing and the use of private or identifying information of targets, including home addresses. This is part and parcel to what libs of TikTok made an entire career out of doing. People who are staffing this administration, people that have been put into power by this regime, used this set of tools to harass random people who were speaking their minds on social media. This is not a coordinated thing by the left. This is entirely what the extreme online right has turned the entire Republican Party into in this country. That they've built an entire movement around harassing single professors or some random college student on a campus at a community college in Portland. Made that cause celeb for justifying extreme overreach and extreme actions on the part of the Department of Education. Let's be honest here. They've taken down studies from the FBI, from the Department of Justice, that highlighted the prevalence of political violence from right-wing actors. And so what they're doing, as Fish said, as we've been discussing throughout this entire thing, it is projection of the highest order. It is like pointing to, talking about the Donald Trump talks about the 2 assassination attempts on his life. One of the people is currently in court in Florida right now, filing briefs arguing that he should be able to play a round of golf to the death with Donald Trump about whether or not he's innocent. This is not someone who was engaged in targeted political violence because he's on the left or the right. This is someone who has some issues, who was standing around with a gun near his golf course. And the other person who took a shot at him in Pennsylvania, in my home state, had a very confused, mixed message about what exactly was going on. And we probably will never find out exactly what the reasoning was, if there was reasoning at all. And so it's just made up. It's fundamentally BS. And we have to call it out. We have to acknowledge that this is all just made up. There is no coordinated campaign here from the left.
Let's go down the list here, okay? Intimidation designed to silence opposing speech. What the fuck did they just do to Jimmy Kimmel, right? What are you going to call that when the head of the FCC threatens a media network to get their late-night talk show host taken down because he criticizes the president? Name something even comparable that happened under a Democratic administration. Number one. Limit political activity, right? Let's talk about the threats and violence directed, not just in this past election, but for decades at polling centers in black neighborhoods that overwhelmingly vote Democratic, right? And then name any kind of similar electoral suppression campaign that you've seen even on the most radical fringes of the left. Violence to change or direct policy outcomes. What was the plot to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer over COVID-19 restrictions? And who did that? It wasn't the left. And violence to prevent the functioning of a democratic society. Again, I present you a bunch of rioters egged on by President Trump trying to stop the vote count on January 6th. The truth is, if you look at the facts, and there's a great study from the University of Maryland that tracks political violence and who does it. Does the right wing do it more? Do Islamic extremists do it more? Or does the left wing do it more? Right wing political violence is twice as likely to occur as left wing political violence in this country. All of it's wrong. But if we're going to name a specific group, if we're going to say one ideology has a bigger problem with political violence than the other, then let's actually use facts, and let's actually use data, and let's actually point out that now and in the past, and unfortunately in the future, the political violence is coming from, well, the same political party whose president tells people to beat up protesters at his rallies.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want I want to make sure and emphasize something here about state violence. And by that, I mean, we need to talk about ICE. Now, in this document, there's discussion of, ICE agents being doxxed, and this is criminal activity, and the federal government is lawfully pursuing the prosecution of people who are basically bullying ICE agents, and that ICE is becoming the victim of violent intimidation. I cannot stress more strongly how clear it is that what ICE is doing is not just violent intimidation, but direct murder of thousands of people. And it doesn't matter their immigration status. We're talking about human lives. We are often talking about actual United States citizens and, green card holders, people with student visas, things like this. But that's kind of irrelevant to me. This agency is doing things like taking toddlers and deporting them without their parents to other countries. They are doing things like deporting people without due process, which is illegal, to what is effectively concentration camps in countries that the person has never been in. This is Gestapo tactics. This is violent. It's not just intimidation. It is violence, full stop. And so to say that the big issue here is that this agency is facing violence rather than this agency is doing violence unto the American people it is a supreme act of gaslighting that I think only this administration is capable of.
Yeah. And they point out in this something about like 1,000% increase in attacks on ICE, but I think what we're getting at to arrive at that number is, well, Your Honor, he ran into my fist, and that was an attack on me. He used his face to attack my fist. That's the level that we're talking about here. I mean, we've seen video after video after video of ICE agents violently assaulting people in courtrooms, in courthouses, pulling people down, throwing innocent people to the ground, injuring people, breaking their ribs, breaking their arms, putting them in the hospital. We've had multiple people die in ICE custody, not just the people who were shot while in ICE custody by, someone who was, for whatever reason, sniping at an ICE facility, but again, only targeted people that were being detained, and we still don't know the reason there. There are people dying in ICE custody, and what they're doing with trying to pretend that doxing is a crime. By the way, it isn't. Harassing people is, intimidating people is, but having people's public names out there are lists of government employees, right? My name is publicly disclosed in the amount of money that I make because I'm the executive of a nonprofit. Fish's name is on financial disclosure forms because we are executives of nonprofits. That's just how it works. When you are a government employee, regardless of whether you're a high-ranking person at the very top of ICE or you're someone who is a legislative consultant or a legislative aide for a member of Congress, your name is public. The amount of money you make is public. Public service, working for the federal government is about public service. And if people are hiding behind masks and afraid of what could happen if people know that they work for the government, that's a sign that you might be doing something a little bit untoward here. I think that, again, they're really telling on themselves with the idea that we can't see the faces of the stormtroops that are out there carrying out this regime's harassment of immigrants or harassment of citizens who happen to look like they might be immigrants. People engaging in what we might call Kavanaugh stops now. I think we have to call that out. These people deserve to be exposed. They deserve to have their faces in the news because they're engaging in the most corrupt, violent extremism that we're seeing in America right now. Let's just be honest about that.
Yeah, it is the height of Orwellianism, where the masked, thuggish kidnappers throwing people in the back of vans to squirrel them away to concentration camps are the heroes, and the people who post on Twitter, hey, the thuggish kidnappers are on this corner today, so you better avoid it, are the people practicing violent intimidation. And I want to call our attention to one of the specific rhetorical tactics that they're using, which is to equate criticism of the government or criticism of ICE as dehumanization or a justification for violence, right? Donald Trump hates nothing more than dissent. And he would love for us to all embrace a definition of terms that equates dissent against his administration with a call for violence. The truth is, humanists, yeah, we deeply believe that what ICE is doing is wrong. And we deeply believe what this administration is doing is wrong. That is not in any way a justification for violence against people. Right? We believe that you can really strongly oppose something is doing, and you meet them with opposing speech and with nonviolent direct action, not through vigilante violence. But the right has a really hard time getting their heads around the idea that you can really strongly disagree with what someone does and not wish violence upon them. Again, because right now the foundation of the radical right is the kind of fire and brimstone evangelism that says if someone does something that disagrees with your moral code, you are empowered to damn them to hell for eternity. We don't believe in that shit. And so that's why I think it's easy for them to make that conflation, because they can't understand the point of view of a humanist who says, I firmly and deeply disagree with everything you do, and I will contest you using every nonviolent means that I have, but I'm not going to raise a fist to you because ultimately you're my fellow human being.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful thing to go out on. I want to show appreciation of you guys for fighting for, in a nonviolent way, fighting for human rights, basic dignity for everyone, for humanist values. And I think that right now is a difficult time to kind of keep your head on straight with the amount of propaganda that we're constantly being gaslit with. I know that even people in my own community are often kind of questioning, am I doing something wrong here just by having my humanist values and thinking that it's wrong to arrest random people and shove them in concentration camps? When you're inundated by the amount of propaganda that we are, it can be difficult to keep things straight, to understand what is right. And I think that's something that both American Atheists and American Humanists does really well, is helps to create in-person communities where people can live with, think with, love with, work with people who all have a strong interest in showing and living humanist values every day. If there's any call to action that I would have at the end of this video, is if there's a local chapter of American Atheists or American Humanists, first of all, they probably know each other and already work together, or they might kind of almost be the same thing in certain places. Yeah. Go get involved. Go get involved with those chapters, not just so that you can do political activism, although that is great, but so that you can just be among people who will help you understand and remember what is right in these crazy times. So community, I think, is often the answer to the extremism that we're seeing here, the gaslighting that we're seeing here. And so you guys go find community. And Nick and Fish, thank you guys so much for doing what you do and helping create community for atheists and humanists.
Thank you, Drew. Can I share one more quick request? One thing that you should know both about the American Humanist Association and American Atheists is that we both have legal defense teams. And if, especially now, you're worried about your rights, you want to understand what discrimination is or isn't, you feel like you're being targeted at work, you feel like you're being denied a service, you feel like your landlord is picking on you, it's important to understand that as atheists, as humanists, you have the same right to not be discriminated against because of your religious beliefs that any Christian does, that any Jew does, that any Muslim does. And we both have legal teams that are there to defend the rights, not just of our members, but anyone who faces religious discrimination on the basis of their humanist or atheist beliefs. So you can reach out to either of our organizations, and we have teams that are here to help you if anything like that ever comes down the pike.
Go do it. Appreciate that, Fish.